Welcome into the EMAW Online podcast. Mason Voth, Alec Bussey with you here from EMAW Online as we get ready to recap a Wildcat victory. K-State takes down TCU last night, 82-61, the final score. K-State was able to pull away in the end. They finished the game on a 17-2 run. I actually thought that there was a lot of good in the game for K-State, but the negatives that still lurked are things that give me a little bit of pause. So they're going to need to back up the win against TCU with not just a win against Texas Tech, but probably another performance that makes me feel comfortable. Because last night, even though I like seeing the outcome for K-State, I didn't like seeing the way that they got to it because I felt like they struggled with. I wrote about it last night, but they struggled with defense below the free throw line is basically the way I phrased it, because that's where TCU made their living last night, was cutting inside or finishing inside. That was a big problem again for K-State handling TCU. And the Wildcats had some really silly turnovers in the game. They turned it over less than TCU, but 12 of the 15 came from Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson. And they had turnovers again that led to easy buckets for the Horned Frogs. So a lot of things that still get corrected for K-State, but a 21-point win is a much better outcome for needing to work on some things than the losses that had piled up the last three times out in Big 12 play. So what were the instant thoughts from you on last night's game for K-State, Alec?
Yeah, obviously to end the game on a 17-2 run over the last 4:23 is pretty impressive. That's what allows K-State to kind of end with a 21-point win. Like you said, obviously the game was a lot closer than that for a majority of the contest, though K-State did, kind of open up a bigger lead at different points in the second half. I thought the biggest thing that K-State did to kind of secure that win was the 11-0 run that they went on after TCU kind of cut it to 6 points. And I thought they got some really impressive play out of Keontae Johnson out of that stretch. He has an assist to Tyke Green on an alley-oop. He has a three-pointer right in front of the K-State bench, and then he has a layup through traffic as well. So he kind of had a part in about 9 or 10 of those points, if I believe I can do math in my head, which I don't think I can because I think that was wrong. It's 3 plus 5, 2, 7. Yeah, I added 3 points. But yeah, Keontae Johnson obviously struggles with foul trouble again in the first half, and that's something that K-State does need to kind of figure out. I know there's some debate about whether or not that the charge call that he was tagged with, that would have been his second one, was a fair whistle or not. The hook that he was called for on the baseline was absolutely a fair call. That was a correct call. Even if it's something that's not called very often in basketball these days, just like the carry. If you do it that blatantly, it's going to be called, and it was a hook. But K-State does need to figure something out with Keontae's first half foul trouble, because I think this is 4 straight games where he's been tagged with 2 fouls in the first half. And I don't think they want to continue to rely on their rotational pieces or bench pieces to give them positive contributions in those situations. But Tyke Green steps up big for K-State yesterday, goes for 13 points on 6 of 11 from the field, and also grabs a team high 9 rebounds. So Tyke Green steps in big time for Keontae Johnson when K-State really needed it.
Yeah, I mean, Tyke Green in his performance yesterday is one of the standouts from the game because he hadn't played as much recently. Yesterday, he ends up playing 21 minutes. That's the most he had played in a game since the season opener against UTRGV. And the first half, he was doing some good things, but also offensively, he struggled and had some killing moments for K-State. But in the second half, I can't find anything to nitpick on him. I thought he played his role defensively well. And then he was able to come through when they needed him on offense. He was efficient, and he was able to find himself around the rim and actually finish. And that was kind of what he struggled with in the first half. So you got a great night from him. Desi Sills gave you a little bit of a punch, and it's more likely that will happen on any given game from Desi Sills, but he hasn't shown to do that consistently yet. There have been the games where Sills has been pretty quiet, but when he's going to give you something, K-State has a good chance to win. And then Bebe Igiola came off the bench last night, and he gave K-State good minutes. He took a couple charges. Jerome Tang thought that he played pretty aggressive down the post and gave them good defense there. So it was an all-around good night for the depth of K-State in the game, because you had some guys that you typically aren't going to rely on step up and help you out. And I think that ultimately ends up helping K-State kind of negate the 12 turnovers that they got from their 2 stars, who, on a positive side, I thought were much better offensively for both of them last night. Marquise Noel, it felt to be a little bit more similar to the Marquise Noel that we had seen earlier in the year. It still wasn't as quite of a dynamic level, but he still came through and shot the ball pretty well, given the volume that he has, and his 18 points were good. He does finish with more assists than turnovers, even though the turnover number was pretty high still. But I think K-State is on the right track with the way that Noel and Johnson played last night. It's just about getting that turnover number down lower.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel the same way about Marquise's game as you do. He does finish with 18 points on the night, but it took him 17 shots to get there. So 7 of 17 from the field. That's not great. He does go 3 of 7 from beyond the 3-point line. But I think it's kind of important to note that 2 of those 3-pointers were kind of scripted, I guess you could say. One of them came late in the shot clock, and it was kind of the one that everyone was referring to as the dagger late in the second half. There was only 4 or 5 seconds left on the shot clock when he let that one fly. And then another one was a pull-up right around the logo as well at the end of the first half in case they was trying to go for a 2-for-1. Not taking anything away from making those 2 3-pointers, but it is kind of important to note that I think one of them was pretty scripted with trying to get a 2-for-1. And again, he made it, so that's impressive. But he still has 6 turnovers, and that's something that just isn't sustainable for K-State. Like, I understand he has a 7 assists, so it's a positive assist-to-turnover ratio, which he's kind of had for most of the season at this point. But 6 turnovers just isn't a positive. I don't care how many assists you've got. If you've turned it over 6 times, that's that's pretty alarming, I guess you could say. And also, it's not like a lot of his turnovers are coming off of offensive fouls. Like Keontae had 3 offensive fouls last night, I believe, and that's where 3 of his 6 turnovers come from. And I think it's better for your turnovers to come because you're getting a charge or a hook call or an offensive foul than it is to simply lose your handle or to make a bad decision on a pass like Marquise has been doing over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 games at this point. So he did a better job, I thought, of playing on both feet and not jumping as much and trying to make passes in the air. But at the same time, too, like he still turned it over 6 times. And that's something that's concerning despite having 7 assists.
Yeah, I thought he was better in the first half than we saw in the second half. It was like he kind of got sped up, and we saw a little bit more of him driving into the lane without really a clear plan in place, and then either kind of panicking and trying to throw something up and out, or jumping in the air and leaving his feet and not knowing where he was going to go with the ball before he landed. So the turnover is still very much a problem. I think that we got to remember here, and we're not math guys, but Noel last night, 7 of 17, that's still 41% shooting. And for a guard, that's pretty good still. His season average is below 40%. He's 39% on the season. So it still turns out to be a pretty good shooting night for him because he's over 40% from the floor, 40% from 3. But there are still moments where it could be cleaned up a little bit. And I think and part of his game is playing a little bit different and more on edge, or however you want to describe it. But there were definitely some shots there last night that maybe he could have made some better decisions on, kept things even more efficient. And at that point, also, if you don't put yourself in that position where the likely outcomes are a poorly missed shot or a turnover, then K-State's in a better spot. But last night was not a great game for Marquise Noel, but it's a game to me that showed that he's getting back on the right track. And that was more important to me than anything last night, was to see that there is some development happening there. The turnovers got to get fixed, though, because 4 of the 6 turnovers came in the second half, and that's the kind of thing that helps you blow double-digit leads like K-State did against Texas, is turning the ball over and giving the Longhorns life. So K-State was able to survive all of that. Now, what I mentioned earlier was K-State's defense below the free throw line last night. So if you look at the court and you take it and everything above the free throw line, or you can even go free throw line extended to, kind of beyond the 3-point line. K-State's defense there was really good yesterday. TCU didn't get a lot of great looks from those areas on the floor. They really struggled. In fact, on shots that happened from outside of the paint, TCU was 24% yesterday. They were 7 of 29 on those shots. The issue ends up being the fact that TCU was still able to get inside and finish for 38 points in the paint, and they shot 18 of 28 around the rim. So their layups and dunks were 18 for 28 on, and that's why TCU for most of the game was able to still kind of hang around, because they shot 44% for the game, and there was a pretty hefty stretch of the game where TCU was shooting like anywhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20% better from the floor than what K-State was, but turnovers were keeping K-State in the game. And the fact that the Wildcats were able to match TCU in points in the paint last night, K-State actually beat them 40-38. And part of that goes to what we talked about with Tyke Green. Also helped to have David Gasson back for K-State, which is something that they did not have the first time that they played TCU. So they made up for it last night. They were able to match TCU, but I still have some concerns about that interior defense where I think K-State has some guys that don't necessarily play at the smartest. I think guys drift a little bit, especially with TCU, a team that doesn't shoot the three very well. They were 17% from three last night. They came in shooting 29% from three. There are a lot of guys that have no business in following a dude to the perimeter, even if the plan is, hey, we might need you in a switching situation. You're not going to have very many guys that are catching the ball that can actually shoot it. So I still have my worries about where this team's defensive IQ is at times. And last night we saw them struggle and kind of get cut to death again, which has been kind of a familiar thing the last couple of weeks because it was the same thing that Kansas did to them and just torched them, where the Wildcats looked a little slow getting into position. So that's something that still needs to be corrected for K-State moving forward. But the defense beyond the paint and above the free throw line was much better because, like I said, they held TCU to under 30% from shooting in those areas, and then they forced 19 turnovers last night.
Yeah, if you look at some of the defensive numbers that K-State's had, they're up to 21 right now in an adjusted defensive efficiency by KenPom. That's obviously pretty impressive, and that's much higher than it was even like 2 weeks ago where they were kind of hovering around like the mid-30s. I think last week at one point they were in the 33 to 35 kind of range. So to see that improvement is definitely something that is inspiring for K-State's defensive play, and I do think they've been better at that end, but it definitely helps when you're playing a team like TCU, who's not a very good shooting team. That'll always help your efficiency numbers, especially when a TCU team shoots just 17% from beyond the three-point line. But I kind of thought the biggest reason that TCU struggled offensively last night was because K-State only allowed them to get 10 points in transition or 10 fast break points last night. And that's an area where TCU really was successful earlier in the season or earlier in the season against K-State was fast break points. When you limit TCU's opportunities to get layups and opportunities at the rim for dunks or whatever, they really struggle offensively because, like you said, they aren't a very good shooting team. They're the worst 3-point shooting team in the Big 12. They're less than 30% from beyond the arc in conference play, and maybe even on the season altogether. So to kind of see K-State play better defense in transition, I think was really important. And I think that's something where they've really kind of started to improve here of late. And I also think it maybe helps a little bit too that, they have some players who played last night who maybe aren't the greatest defenders, like Ish Massoud, for whatever reason, didn't play very much last night. And I think a lot of that has to do with the impact that Tyke Green was giving them. I think it was just one of those nights where Tang kind of went with the hot hand. And Ish also has kind of seen his shooting numbers fall off a little bit over the last 4 or 5 games. So I think it's a little bit easier for Tang.
Well, honestly, like real quick, let's dive into it. I think it's a matchup thing. I think it's the fact that TCU is so physical that Ish wasn't going to help them really at all on defense last night. And because they played with the lead, they didn't feel like they had to sacrifice some things for that offense. And in addition to that, Naquan Tomlin only played 18 minutes last night, and he wasn't in foul trouble. He only had 2 fouls. And I think it's because Naquan Tomlin in that game last night was a defensive liability for K-State.
Yeah, and he's been bad defensively here, I feel like, over the last bit of games. And even offensively, too, I think K-State could do more to get him involved. I know I said to you last night at one point in the game, I feel like K-State's almost too reliant on the production that Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson can give them. And that's a great duo. I mean, we don't need to continue to beat a dead horse and repeat ourselves and say it's one of the best duos, not just in the Big 12, but in the entire country. But it almost comes to a point where you're sacrificing the production of other players. And I know they had 5 players last night finished in double figures, with Gassan getting 10. Obviously, Tyke has 13, like we said, and Desi has 14 in addition to your 2 stars, both getting into double figures. But at the same time, like, it's tough to rely on David Gassan to give you 10 points. And you're not going to be able to rely on Tyke Green to give you 13 points off the bench. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Tyke doesn't score more than 10 points again this season.
He may not score a combined 13 points the rest of the season for K-State. And that's not disrespect to Tyke Green. It's just reality. Like where the situation is. Like, it probably won't happen. And
Desi too. Like Desi goes for 24 against Kansas, but then he doesn't have more than 4 or 5 points up until last night's game. So it comes to a point where K-State has been fortunate enough to get ancillary scoring from other players at various times this year. But like Jerome Tang said after the game last night, he just wants consistency. And right now, like, I don't think he knows who their third scorer is going to be on a night-to-night basis, because even you can look at someone like Cam Carter, who didn't miss a shot in the loss at Iowa State 2 weeks ago, but then doesn't take a single shot in the second half. So that's just kind of an example of, like, you don't know where your scoring is going to come from if it's not coming from Marquise Noel or Keontae Johnson. And I think that's tough on K-State's offense. I know I just kind of spun your whole defensive thing to the offensive side of the
it's all right
spectrum. I didn't mean to necessarily do that, but yeah, K-State's defense I thought was better last night, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I thought that there were a lot of things that were better about it. I just there are still some weaknesses there, and obviously the inside is a big part of that problem. And I think that's why, like, we saw Jerome Tang, give more minutes to Tyke Green and more minutes to Bebe Igiola. So if we look at how the game ended up playing out in the first half of last night's game, Igiola plays 9 minutes, Green plays 7 minutes, and then Naquan Tomlin played 14 minutes. In that stretch, though, for TCU, if you go and look at their first half numbers, in the first half, TCU was 18 of 28 on layups and dunks. Or I guess that's for the game. It doesn't really show for the second half. It doesn't split those out. But it felt like K-State was better about that in the second half. And in the second half, like, you go and look at how the minutes end up getting distributed. Gasson played 17 minutes in the second half. He only got 9 in the first. But then Green plays 15, and Igiola had his minutes limited there. But Green, I think, stepping up was a big part of the deal for K-State last night, and having those guys step up. So Naquan Tomlin is not always going to only play 18 minutes a game, even if he's struggling defensively. But last night, matchup-wise, I think K-State thought that they had something, and the way that game was going to be won wasn't necessarily by K-State having to just continue to outscore TCU, but get enough stops and grab some rebounds, because that's another big deal, is that K-State was able to come away with plenty more rebounds than TCU in the game. The Wildcats end up out-rebounding TCU 40-28, and I have to go back to look to see what it was in Fort Worth, but the Wildcats got killed on the glass against TCU, and especially on offensive rebounds. And K-State won the offensive rebounding battle 13-6 last night. So K-State had a lot of these things that they corrected from the first game against TCU, and that was impactful. And I think the growth that they showed, like, it doesn't mean that they're fixed yet. Like, I'm still on edge about that, but they've definitely taken a step in the right direction. I thought Jerome Tang as a head coach took a step in the right direction last night, where that lead got down to 6 for K-State. They looked a little bit sloppy, and to use Jerome Tang's words, maybe they weren't rattled, but they certainly seemed to have lost their focus. He called the timeout, and from that point, that's when K-State finishes the game on a 17-2 run. And instead of it being kind of a tight one in the final 4 minutes of action, K-State ends up blowing the roof off the place and wins 82-61. So I thought Jerome Tang learning last night and having this stretch where he's going to learn how to use those timeouts a little bit differently. And maybe it has to change the way he views it as a coach, understanding the situation. But I thought last night it wasn't a great game for K-State, but it was a good game that had a lot of great moments of growth in it. And I'm repeating myself plenty of times by saying that, but I think to me that was the theme of last night's game for K-State.
Yeah, and I think it was an important game for them to get. Obviously, it was 3 in a row in Big 12 play, 3 of 4 overall. It's a game that you needed to get. They're still in the fight, I guess you could say, for a Big 12 title. At this point, obviously things might be tough in that race at this point, just because you're behind a couple teams, but at the end of the day, too, you're still tied for third place with KU at a 7-4 record behind Iowa State, who's 7-3, and then Texas is in first with an 8-3 record. But if Iowa State wins tonight at West Virginia, they'll move into a tie with Texas. And if they lose, they'll obviously move into a tie with KU and K-State. So all things considered, K-State's definitely still in that run, definitely still in that fight for a conference title right now. If you look at Bart Torvik's conference title odds matrix thing that he has, K-State has about a 19.5% chance to earn at least a share of the league. which is the third best in the Big 12 behind Texas and Iowa State. Actually, I lied. I misread that. K-State's at 18.5 or 18.8%. That's fourth best in the league behind Texas, Iowa State, and Kansas. Kansas is at 19.7%. So obviously still have a chance in that race at this point, and that's obviously something that you want to be proud of and something that you want to prop up and maintain an opportunity to win a league title.
Yeah, if you go and look at my favorite site, B-Ball, Not Nothing, the way that they do it is they take the Sagarin rating of each team in that game, and that's how they project a winner. So like for tonight, all three home teams in the Big 12 are projected to win. So if you just take like the Sagarin rating for basketball and you play out the rest of the season and you say that the Sagarin favorite wins in each of those games, and that accounts for home court, it would have three teams finishing 12-6 in the Big 12, with Texas finishing 13-5. So that would give Texas the outright Big 12 title, with TCU, K-State, and KU all there in second, third, and fourth. And it actually has Iowa State and Baylor at 11-7. So I don't think that's how it's going to finish. But K-State kept themselves alive. It was obviously huge that Texas, after not only having to play a really tough game against K-State on Saturday, had a short turnaround on the road in the toughest place to play in the country and going down Fieldhouse. I didn't put a lot of money on it, but if I didn't have a wife that would have been very upset at me, I would have put a lot of money on Kansas to win that game on Monday, because that's just the kind of game. Awful loss going there. I didn't see any way Texas would win it. I thought they played better than I thought that they might. I think Texas still has a couple more losses in them, and the fact that K-State and KU were able to win this week, that gives them a chance. And we'll see if Iowa State is able to answer it, because Iowa State puts themselves in a good spot if they're able to do it. The tough part for Iowa State, though, is that they have road trips remaining to Manhattan and to Austin that they have to get taken care of. And they may still have to go to Waco as well. So they still have some tough ones on the road. And it's not a foregone conclusion that they win in Morgantown tonight. So there's a lot going on in the Big 12 still. And K-State, with that win last night, they kind of kept things alive for them. And now, even though you're about to go on the road, you have to win these next two games if you're K-State. At Texas Tech and at Oklahoma, the two worst teams in the Big 12. Go find ways to win them, take care of business, and then you have that pretty decent break in between a Tuesday game in Norman to a Saturday home game against Iowa State next weekend. That'll really tell us what K-State's season is going to be like. But last night kind of revived the energy and excitement towards K-State and what they have going on. Not like it had completely disappeared or anything, but it hurts when you lose three straight conference games, and it feels like you're letting the league race kind of slip away from you once you get past the halfway point. And K-State did a good job of clinging on to it last night and showing that they can still compete.
Yeah, and I think it is kind of important to kind of highlight the next 3 or 4 games that K-State has. It's definitely favorable that you get the last two of them at home against the two better teams, with Iowa State and Baylor both coming to Manhattan. But the two road games I don't think are going to be particularly easy. Texas Tech is obviously playing a little bit better of late, and while they've gotten blown out in a few Big 12 games this season, they've also played a lot of games fairly close. And right now, it's a game that I would expect K-State to probably be in a little bit of a dogfight with. It's going to be a sellout crowd at Texas Tech. From everything we've kind of read, They put out a statement saying it was a sellout after they had beaten Iowa State. And if you're a K-State fan and you're just circling that game as a win, I would do your best to turn that pencil upside down and use a purple pink eraser or whatever color the eraser is on top of your pencil to circle that as a win at this point, because Texas Tech is a tough place to play. It's a team that's better than what their record says they are. And right now, if you just kind of look at projections, K-State's projected only win by 1.4 points by Bart Torvik. So that's obviously something that's going to be close. But it's favorable that you get to play the two worst teams in the Big 12 on back-to-back road trips. Going to Texas Tech, obviously, on Saturday. And then, like you said, playing at Oklahoma on Tuesday at the Lloyd Noble Center. And that's another game that I expect to be close. I actually feel more confident that K-State's going to win at Oklahoma on Tuesday than they are at Texas Tech on Saturday. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I actually think Texas Tech might be better than Oklahoma. I know I ranked Oklahoma one spot ahead of Texas Tech in our Big 12 rankings this week. But at the same time, too, like it's tough for me to really buy stock into either one of those programs. They both struggled a lot in Big 12 play this year. But Oklahoma pounds Alabama. So that's kind of why I put them ahead of Texas Tech. But it's going to be tough to go into Lubbock and get a win. Much tougher than it is going to be to go into Oklahoma and get a win. So these next 2 games, you definitely need to win them both at this point, because if you're going to win a Big 12 title, I don't think you can safely take a loss at either one of those schools. I know Iowa State's still in the fight, and they lost at Iowa and they lost at Texas Tech, but it's tough when you've got a home loss at this point in Big 12 play.
Yeah. No, I think that there is there's reason to be concerned for what could be coming the way of K-State, but again, like every game in the Big 12 should have you on edge. It's just up to you then to go out there and take care of the games you're supposed to take care of. And if you're a good team, like these are the games where you can be uneasy about them, but you should still be able to go out and finish off. So we'll see how it ends up working out for K-State and where things end up moving from there. And ultimately, I guess we'll also have to follow along. You talked about Texas Tech and what they have going. I think Texas Tech is a better basketball team than Oklahoma. Oklahoma only has one more conference win than Texas Tech. Texas Tech has shown maybe more life and more fight. I think they've just, they've been banged up for times. Fordoz Amick was out for a while. Pop Isaacs has been dealing with some stuff now. And that's the thing that K-State has on the horizon is you're starting to get some teams that they're banged up and now they're missing pieces. Like K-State shouldn't have to apologize for that because that's just how it works sometimes. Like they had to play their first half of the league schedule without David Gasson, and clearly it makes them a different team. Maybe not as much offensively, but defensively you can tell a difference. And so last night you got a gimpy Eddie Lampkin, and you got to play TCU without Mike Miles. That's fine. That's, no apologies for that. This weekend, we'll see how the availability of Isaacs and Amick looks for Texas Tech because they're kind of down. And I think even Daniel Bacho is dealing with some things right now. So Tech, they play tonight. So we'll see how they look this evening. They're going against Oklahoma State on the road in Stillwater. But there's a chance that even if those guys play, you're getting a limited Tech. So K-State is getting teams at the right time and can take advantage of that. They're just going to have to be on top of it. And that's why, going back to what we talked about in last night's game and some of the ways K-State has played, that's what makes the Noel and Johnson turnovers so infuriating, is because that's really the only way that you lose to an inferior opponent, is if you go out there with how good K-State has defended in most areas of the floor. If you're turning the ball over and giving good opportunities to the other team and more opportunities, you're going to lose the basketball game. And so it didn't kill them last night. They forced more from TCU, but it's just something to still be alarmed about. You can still, like, to use a recent example in my household, you can still bake the pizza rolls in the oven, but if the oven starts to catch on fire, there's still a problem with the oven, even if you can still eat the pizza rolls, So
you big
probably
pizza rolls guy?
No, I probably hadn't had them in like however many years, but then all of a sudden they showed up in my freezer one day, and my wife wanted them. I was like, okay. And so I haven't gotten them since the
I feel
incident.
like pizza rolls are one of those things that you eat as a kid. You're like, oh, this is good. Like, this is great. And then you have them as an adult, and you're like, what am I putting in my body?
Well, you can get burnt out on them, literally and figuratively, if you're in my house. But since I hadn't had them in so long, I was actually like, okay, yeah, I see the appeal of these. Like,
What are some other foods that you liked as a kid that you're like, I don't really eat that anymore?
Kid cuisines. No.
Yeah,
Those were I'm not even really sure I liked those when I was a kid. But
they're easy to make though.
They were easy to make.
Were you a big Gushers guy?
No, I don't like fruity gummy type stuff like that. I'm out on that.
I was never a big Gushers person, but I feel like Gushers are a good example of something that a lot of kids like. But then once you get to a certain age, like, I can't eat that anymore.
Like gummy bears and stuff, never been my style. Really, like my whole family were like that. We're just not big.
I like gummy stuff,
people.
but I don't like how gummy. Do you like Dots, like candy?
No.
Oh, really? Okay, so I like Dots. I'm not a big candy guy, but I like Dots.
Yeah,
I get that from my mom. She loves Dots. So it's chocolate your go-to then for?
I see, but like I don't even really like chocolate that much.
So if you're going into a gas station or convenience store, you got a long road trip. Like say you're driving back from the Lloyd Noble Center to Wichita at 2:00 in the morning, and you're like, man,
Yep.
I just really need something sweet to get me here. Like, what are you buying in the convenience store?
I'm probably not getting something sweet. I'm probably going like more along the salty route.
Okay.
So, actually, a great road trip snack that people will
The Bucky's
sometimes.
Club.
Well, the Bucky's Club is fantastic, but like if you're popping into a gas station, you need a little something. Uh, you get some bugles, but you don't get like the regular kind of bugles. You get the caramel bugles, so you get a little salty and sweet on those. That's my go-to. If I go
I'm a
in and
big
I need
salty and
something.
sweet guy. I can get on with that.
Yeah,
We
I
might
will
need to
say
pack up a good amount of snacks for this trip to
M
Lloyd Noble Center next week.
M&M's used to make these little things that they were like
Oh, you
they
get
were
the
like kind
pretzels
of.
in them.
Yeah, well, yeah, pretzel M&Ms are great. I love peanut M&Ms. So yeah, the sweet and salty thing is kind of my thing. But they had these packages that were like a mix, and they had some other things in there that were really good. So those used to be a pretty prime thing to get. But
When
yeah,
you
like
were
I was.
when
Go
you were
ahead.
a kid, did you think the different color M&Ms tasted different? Because
No,
I did. I was an idiot, apparently. I thought they tasted differently.
you
But
can
I think
trick
I just
yourself
like
into
certain
thinking that.
colors more. Like red's my favorite color.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always just liked the yellow of peanut M&Ms. But so yes, K-State, buy a new oven, even if you were still able to cook last night. And that's where I think that's really the one thing that I'm still maybe concerned about for K-State. I have interest in how Noel and Johnson continue to look from an offensive standpoint, but the turnover thing is really the number one concern because if they get that under control and they continue to defend for the most part like they have, they should be good. Now, they do still, although, I mean, we're sitting here in February. I don't know that K State's defense inside is going to get much better. So you're going to have to learn how to live with that. And if that's the part of you that's going to falter, then you better be smart everywhere else. So the margin of error for K State, most people have known this, but it's a lot thinner than what other teams in the race of the Big 12 have right now. And that's why getting performances from Green and Sills and Isiola last night at various points was pretty impactful for them because when you've got a thin margin of error and you get some unexpected boost from guys on your team, you're going to be able to kind of get in there and bounce back a little bit easier. So, all in all, a good game for K-State last night. But just like everything, you can't get me tricked with just one win. One win doesn't fix a team. I got to see you go out there and back that up now. And K-State's going to have to do that this weekend when they take on Texas Tech.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think I agree with you on the idea that the interior defense just kind of is what it is. I don't think there's going to be much that you can do to kind of change that because obviously K-State lacks some of the physical specimens on the inside that they need to defend some other players. So
Yeah.
they're going to need to just kind of scheme things a little bit better when it comes to the idea of post trapping and doing different things like that, and forcing other players to beat them than the better players on the inside.
Yeah. We'll see kind of how it ends up looking and what the next kind of steps are for K-State and everything. This weekend's game against Texas Tech is a 6:00 tip-off. Here is what Mark Adams had to say yesterday on his three guys that are currently a little bit banged up. He said that Pops is doing his rehab every day. Dawes is doing the same. He's kind of day-to-day now. We never push our players to come back from injury too early. At the very end, it's a player decision. But the guy Pop he would go play in that boot that he's been wearing lately. So still a boot on Pop Isaacs. So we'll see how that works. And then for Daniel Bacho, he said he's lost so much weight and we're trying to get him some strength. But over the last few days, he seems to be making some improvements. So nothing of, I guess, real interest there. But it kind of gives us some insight as to where those three guys for Texas Tech that play a pretty significant role for them might be. And again, like I said, we'll get a pretty good indicator tonight, I would imagine, in their game against Oklahoma State, because very similar to TCU's situation, we could tell by the way things went last week for the Horned Frogs what their situation seemed to be. Like it seemed unlikely that Mike Miles would play last night, and Eddie Lampkin, maybe he wouldn't play. Maybe he would play some and be limited. And last night, I think he played more than I thought he might, but he was still very clearly limited out there. So I don't expect a full-strength Texas Tech basketball team on Saturday for K-State.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to assume that Texas Tech hasn't been at full strength all year, considering they didn't get far out of AMAC until January, and he was obviously expected to be one of their more important players. So it's tough when you have to work a player like that into your rotation in January, February, just because it's tough to kind of work someone in when it comes to defensive rotations and understanding the playbook and understanding chemistry on the offensive end and all those different things. Like, it's tough to work someone in late when it comes to basketball. And I think it's fair to assume that Texas Tech hasn't ever really been at 100% this year. I don't really expect them to be at Saturday either.
Yeah, we'll see how it ends up working out and working. So a couple of other things with the Big 12 going on tonight. Iowa State at West Virginia. Obviously, a lot of people rooting for West Virginia in that game, as they probably should be. Do you think the Mountaineers can pull off the upset? Although it's technically not an upset because West Virginia is a 3.5-point home favorite this evening against Iowa State.
Yeah, I actually think West Virginia wins.
Okay. Music to my ears. Iowa State is just 2-5 away from Hilton Coliseum this year. So there you go. Little insight there. Tech, Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's a 6-point favorite in that game. And then Baylor and Oklahoma from Waco. Baylor's a 9.5-point favorite. I just think it's going to be fascinating to watch Oklahoma and how they try and finish out here. It seems like Oklahoma is kind of done with Porter Moser, and Porter Moser is kind of done with Oklahoma. I know that maybe was it you that sent me something about how he's trying to angle pretty good for the Notre Dame job.
I think I said that he would be a decent candidate considering he coached at a private school in the Midwest and he's more of a Midwestern guy.
Well, somebody sent me a tweet the other day that there was somebody that was reporting that he's trying to work the back channels to get the Notre Dame job. So
I think Notre Dame might be able to get Chris Holtmann.
Well, do they want him
at this point? If he were to want to leave Ohio State. I mean, I don't think Ohio State's going to fire him, but there's a lot of discontent right now in the Ohio State basketball community around the lack of success that this year's team has had. And Chris Holtmann has been the person who's received a lot of that. So I wouldn't be surprised if Chris Holtmann's like, you know what, I want to get out of here. And he ends up at Notre Dame. Yeah,
we'll have to see how it ends up going down. All right. You want a list that Jerome Tang appears on. Dick Vitale, the greatest writer at ESPN, has a story published under his name today. He gives 21 coaches for his Coach of the Year candidates this year in college
basketball.
Why
is Coach of the Year discourse so popular in college basketball? People get so captivated by this discussion every year, and I don't get it.
All right, let's go through this list. It's a hell of a list. Steve Alford of Nevada. So Jerome Tang has beaten him this year, just a note. Big win for Nevada last night, who beat New Mexico on the road. So the Wolfpack, I'd have to look at the standings, but they definitely are up there. They might be leading the Mountain West now. And it helped K-State in the always important net rankings. The Wildcats took I believe a 5-spot jump yesterday with their win and then some help elsewhere. Yeah, the Wildcats went from 21 to 16 last night because Butler got a win over St. John's yesterday as well. So
I'm looking at the Sticky V article right now. Real great analysis here. There's a good sentence for each coach.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's great. Here's Rick Barnes' case for being Coach of the Year. He is one of the premier defensive teams in America. They're battling in a tough SEC. Is the SEC tough this year? Because Arkansas actually sucks. Kentucky sucks. Missouri is better than we expected, but they're, on the same level as Arkansas and Kentucky. Florida's not anything special. Like, okay, whatever. Randy Bennett of St. Mary's on this list. Brad Brownell of the Clemson Tigers. Brownell, he's been at Clemson, it feels like forever, and he's always had him like on the fringe of doing some good things.
Yeah, he always saves his job.
And they're actually doing it this year. Another guy very similar to Brad Brownell is Jeff Capel, who in his 900th season at Pitt has finally got a team that's winning games. They're tied for first place in the ACC with Clemson and Virginia. Chris Collins at Northwestern, gross. Northwestern, frauds, stuffy, annoying people. Ed Cooley of Providence. I am an Ed Cooley guy, but no need this year for Ed to win it. Let's see. TJ Otzelberger makes the list, as well as Kelvin Sampson, Jerome Tang, Rodney Terry, and Shaka Smart on the list. Here is Jerome Tang's.
Unbelievable that you didn't say Matt Painter. I
Yeah,
think
Matt
Painter
Painter
might be
is
a
on
favorite
there.
at this point, along with Jerome Tang. Like, I
Here
think
is
those are the two favorites.
here is Matt Painter's write-up. Purdue last made the Final Four in 1980. Painter has them in the mix 43 years later. I tell you what, Dickie V, I want more Dickie V articles on ESPN.com. For Jerome Tang, he says Tang's first season in Manhattan has been special. Kansas State is in the hunt in the best conference in America. And then Rodney Terry taking over from Chris Beard in the middle of the season was a challenge. He has done a great job with the Longhorns, who are atop the Big 12. So
if there's four coaches who deserve it, in my opinion, in no particular order right now, Jerome Tang, Matt Painter, TJ Altenberger, and Rodney Terry.
I would probably go Tang, Terry, Otzelberger, Painter, because what we're really giving it to Matt Painter for is for taking one of the top 10 teams in college basketball and just making them play like the number one team in college basketball this year with
but this year's team's a lot different.
Yeah, because they lost
a lottery pick and an All-American.
That's true. That is true. But
and they have two freshmen.
The Big Ten is much different this year too.
Huh?
Like the Big Ten's much different this year too. Like it's a down Big Ten compared to what past years are. That's why I think what like Tang and Terry have done.
Yeah, I think Tang would be the person that I would give it to. I mean, to be picked last in the Big 12 before the year and then be in an opportunity to potentially earn a share of it. It's the best conference. Like I think Tang is right there, and I think Otzelberger is right there. I just think that you have to include Matt Painter in the conversation because Matt Painter,
yes, put him in
there. Coaching the best team, and they were picked bottom half, middle of the pack in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I believe in the Athletics preseason poll where they survey all the conferences media because the Big Ten doesn't do a preseason poll like the Big 12 does.
I think it has to be Tang right now, especially if K-State just continues on the pace that they're on, because over the last 3 seasons, K-State averaged 11 wins each year. They won 34 games the last 3 seasons, and they were picked last in the Big 12, toughest conference in America. And not only is the Big 12 the toughest conference in America, it has exceeded what people thought it was going into this season. And for Jerome Tang to have his team, as the great Dick Vitale said, in the mix to end it all, and the way they sit right now, like his locks for the NCAA tournament, he's more than deserving of it. Painter needs to be in the conversation. I'm not as impressed when you take a team that has been a perennial top 10 team over the last decade and all of a sudden, like, it's your turn to be number one. Okay, that's awesome. He's doing a good job there. But the circumstance is much different, whereas like Tang obviously came into a mess. Rodney Terry, essentially what Rodney Terry is doing is, he was on the staff. He's been a head coach in college basketball before. I think he's got the deepest team in the Big 12. There's a bunch of talent there. He just had to guide him through the part where Chris Beard was an idiot and was a lot of other bad words and was an awful human and got fired for it. And so he had to just get his team through that. But at this point now, like, Texas is just doing what Texas should have done all along. So Terry still deserves it for what he's doing in the role that he had to step into. But I think the winner should still be Jerome Tang as we sit right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tang is probably right there in that conversation. I just would include the other people.
Yeah. So that's your little coach of the year talk. I love seeing that. I love that Dickie V's still writing stuff the way it ends up working out. The Big 12, I talked about its difficulty level and the way that it ended up working out. K-State moves up to 16 in the net. The Big 12 now, as it stands, has 7 teams inside the top 30 of the net rankings. Oklahoma State is at 35, then OU and Texas Tech are at 60 and 72. This isn't as recent because it's changed now, but as of like yesterday, the average net ranking in the Big 12 was 27. The next closest is the Big 10 at 57 for an average ranking. So kind of insane what they've been able to do, and it helps that the 3 teams that are like in the bottom of the net rankings for the Big 12 were able to go and win their Big 12 SEC Challenge matchup. So like Oklahoma, they've sucked in the Big 12, but they were good in the non-con, and then they beat Alabama. Same for Tech. They've been bad in the Big 12, but they were able to go out and win their game against LSU, which ends up being significant. The fact that K-State is now in a position as well to note, they're 6-4 in quad 1 games, and they are 3-1 in quad 2 games, and then 10-0 in 3-4. So K-State has maneuvered and handled the top of the leagues really well. And I don't know. I just a lot of numbers and notes to throw out there to kind of give people a little bit of a look as to what K-State has going on right now.
Yeah, we'll see. I think the Big 12's been, I mean, there's no arguing that the Big 12's been the best league in America. Like, it's not close.
As it stands at this point, only one game remains for K-State. That will be a quad 2 game, and that will be their final home game of the year against Oklahoma. So everything else remaining is quad 1, which means you're either 1 through 30 if you're at home, or 1 through 75 if it's a road game. That's why Texas Tech and Oklahoma are still technically quad 1 games, which helps boost the resume a little bit. So I think that's about all I have on this. Real quick, we can note on football. You tweeted out earlier today, and it was the full list of the participants for the combine. But K-State is going to be sending 4 guys to Indianapolis for the scouting combine this year. Deuce Vaughn, Malik Knowles, Felix Anyadike-Uzama, and Julius Brents all get invitations to go there. The 2 defensive guys, in Brents and Anyadike-Uzama, those 2 guys are we could probably see them go on Thursday or Friday of the draft. And then I would imagine that we see Knowles and Vaughn go in the later rounds on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, getting an invite to the combine doesn't guarantee that you're getting drafted. It just means that NFL teams are interested enough in you as a prospect or as a player to potentially draft you. They want to get a better look at the type of player that you are. I do think that Felix probably ends up closer to being a 2nd or 3rd round pick than a 1st round pick. Most projections at this point don't have him in the 1st round. And we'll see where Julius Brents ends up going. I'm far from an NFL draft expert, far from it.
What?
It's difficult for me to project that stuff because like I know why Anthony Richardson, for example, Florida's quarterback, is a projected 1st round pick because the measurables there are great. He can throw the ball 80 yards in the air from a knee. He can run a 4.23 or whatever he's going to run in the 40, but he also throws the ball in the dirt or throws it 60 yards over his guy's head. So I get it. Like, the measurables are there and the tools are there, but I also see the film. It's the same thing with sticking with the quarterback at the top of the draft. It's like Will Levis has like great measurables and was expected to be a 1st round pick entry in the year, and he did not have a good season for Kentucky. Yet he's projected to be a higher draft pick by a lot of people than CJ Stroud, which I just like turn the tape on. Like, turn on the tape and see who's better. Like, it's clear that CJ Stroud's a better quarterback than Will Levis. But anyway, like, we'll end up seeing where these 3 or 4 guys go in the draft. Again, like, I wouldn't be surprised if Deuce falls to the 5th, 6th, 7th round just because of his size, his lack of explosive speed. But I do think someone's going to end up taking a chance on him, and he'll have an opportunity to crack an NFL roster at the very least.
Yeah, I think seeing Malik Knowles on there surprised me a little bit. I know why. Like, he's got some good height to him, and there's things to like. He can obviously be used as a kick returner in the NFL as well. But good for him to get that opportunity. And 4 guys going to the combine for K-State. I am like you. I'm no combine or scouting expert, but I can't even remember the last time that K-State would have sent 4 guys to the combine. That's a pretty notable number. And obviously, to have it as balanced as it was, 2 on offense and 2 on defense, kind of shows you why K-State was able to win the Big 12 this year, because they had great talent on both sides of the ball. It balanced out. And then, not to mention, like we've talked about a couple of times, if Will Howard plays like he did this upcoming year, he will be in Indianapolis next year as well as a quarterback, with the height and a lot of the other things that he can do. So
I will say next year's quarterback class is supposed to be really good, though.
Yeah, that's true.
With guys like Caleb Williams and Drake May coming out as the headliners.
Yeah, we'll have to see though and follow along with it. But Always good to have some cats in Indianapolis.
I guess Quinn Ewers is eligible next year too, isn't he?
Yeah, but
Who else is eligible at quarterback next year?
is Quinn Ewers really going to get to go after he sits on the bench for 7 games behind Arch?
Well, I mean, I was just like throwing names out there of who else is eligible at quarterback next year because, I mean, for it to be a really good draft class, you obviously need at the quarterback
your
position.
2024 draft eligible quarterbacks. So Caleb Williams, Drake May, Michael Penix Jr.
Yeah, because he just had to come back for another year.
Bo Nix.
Would not draft him.
Jalen Milroe of Alabama.
Would not draft him either.
Jordan Travis of Florida State.
He is good.
JJ McCarthy at Michigan.
Yeah, he's
KJ Jefferson at Arkansas. Grayson McCall, the Coastal Carolina quarterback.
Yeah, he won't get picked.
Sam Hartman, who transferred to Notre Dame.
I believe Kyle McCord out of Ohio State will be eligible.
Yep, he will be as well.
I know he's only going to have potentially 1 year as a starting quarterback under his belt, but you light it up for 1 year, you've got an opportunity.
You got Spencer Rattler. If anybody wants
honestly,
Spencer
he
Rattler.
probably could have considered coming out this year, considering the way the end of his season went.
Jackson Dart, Baron Morton of Texas Tech, Will Rogers, DJ Uiagalelei, Devin Leary, who was the NC State guy. He transferred to Kentucky.
The injuries killed him this year.
So a lot of them out there. Tua's younger brother will be drafted eligible.
Say his name.
I really don't know how to say his first name. Is it Talia?
Talia Tagovailoa.
Okay, yeah, okay. Dylan Gabriel, draft eligible. Joe Milton. So yeah,
Joe Milton is the comp for Anthony Richardson.
He's a wild card
can
next
throw
year.
the ball 800 yards with one flick of the wrist, but can also throw it 15 yards over his guy's head and 6 rows into the bleachers. But that guy is tantalizing to watch throw a football.
Yeah. The guy that was a Heisman contender after 2 weeks against the Sisters of the Poor, Jalen Daniels, is draft eligible next year. So as we know, according to the people that have ties to Lawrence, Jalen Daniels, the best quarterback since I don't know, Cam Newton, is going to be draft eligible next year. So I look forward to seeing him go number 2 overall next season.
You want to make a bet on who the number 1 pick is next year?
No, it'll change.
Who would your team, the Dallas Cowboys, they go 0-17 next year. Just ravaged by injuries. The Mike McCarthy offensive play caller thing just doesn't work. He gets fired after week 5 or 6, which I actually think is going to happen regardless. And the Cowboys have the first pick. Dak, God forbid this actually happens, suffers a career-ending injury. And they're like, you know what? We're gonna take a quarterback.
Okay.
Who would you want them to take number 1 overall? Caleb Williams or Drake May?
It's a great question.
I know my answer to this, by the way. I'm just curious what your answer is.
I mean, I really do like Drake May.
I think Drake May is who I would take.
Yeah, I don't know. I would probably go. I'd be good either way there. Right.
Caleb Williams does some things that are like, wow, how did he do that? And then other times I'm like, that was just stupid, but it worked. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's some stupid there. But also, I think Drake May has some of that. He's just playing at North Carolina, so the expectations are a lot lower. So, like, you know, Carolina went, like 9-3 or 8-4 this year.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, whatever, not great, not bad. But with USC, like Caleb Williams had 2 games where he needed to play well in them, and he got banged up in one of them and everything in the Pac-12 championship. But well,
he played great against UCLA. You would know that if you watched the Conference of Champions.
I watched.
You did not watch that game. I know you didn't watch that game because that game was right after a K-State game in the afternoon, and that game was played at like 6 or 7 o'clock, and you were driving back to Wichita.
Was that I don't know. That might have been the day of the West Virginia game, and I did not watch. Or no, UCLA. Who did UCLA play that night? I don't know. One of those games
might actually be the night. I think that was actually the UCLA of the West Virginia game.
I don't know, but I've watched enough of it. I'd be okay with Caleb Williams, but I do think Drake May.
Well,
He's a little,
not everyone can be blessed to have Jesus with an arm playing quarterback. So
I don't know. I'd probably rather him just go ahead and take Will Howard. Call it good,
well,
winner, proven winner.
You're gonna get Bijan Robinson to run the ball this year, and then you can draft Will Howard to play quarterback.
Yep.
Or maybe they'll draft Quinn, and you guys will just replicate Texas's backfield.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. Like I would rather just have the guy that's actually won a championship in college. Like Caleb Williams hasn't, Drake May hasn't.
You're a big QB wins guy, aren't you?
Well, no, I'm not like they're everything.
Oh,
but
you're
they're
a
definitely
huge QB
something.
wins guy. The amount of times I had to listen to you tell me about how, I'd feel a lot better if I was you if Justin Fields had won a game this year.
Yes,
I was like, wrong.
Just one game.
Wrong. You know what would have happened if you won one game? We wouldn't have the number one pick.
That's
so
all right.
thank you, Justin, for putting us in a position to win a lot of the games.
That's all right. That's all right. We'll get out of here. Alec and I will debate quarterbacks off air, and we'll be back on Friday to preview the game with Texas Tech. Probably get a little bit more clarity on what the Red Raiders injury situation will end up looking like and what the Wildcats have to face when they go down to Lubbock. And then we will have plenty of coverage from that game, as well as some off-season notes with football coming up, some recruiting updates coming in the next couple of days as well. So be on the lookout for those. Also, 5 film favorites, depending on when you're listening to this, from Alec from last night's game. Those will be up and available for everybody to take a peek at to relive the Wildcats' 82-61 victory over TCU. So that'll do it for Alec and I. Be sure to you can subscribe to us on our YouTube page, also on either of the podcast links that you go to, and be sure to get signed up over on Rivals.com. Go to KansasState.Rivals.com, and it's less than $10 a month. You can become a member of EMAW Online. Hit up the message boards, read all the great content over there, because we just flooded after basketball games. More content than what you probably thought you needed, but you can waste away your day at work reading about K-State basketball, because that's a lot more exciting than any other job that you could have right now. So that'll do it for us. We are out. We're back on Friday.